Notice of motion number 1, standing in the name of the Leader of the Opposition. According to the standing order, the question is that this matter now proceed as business of the House. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. President, I move that the matter proceed forthwith.
The question is that of the Leader of the Opposition. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I move that under Section 41 of the Interpretation Act 1987, this House disallows the Service New South Wales One-Stop Access to Government Services Amendment Approved Persons Regulation 2017, published on the New South Wales Legislation website on 19 May 2017. Last Friday, the Government enacted the regulation, not with any fanfare. They didn't actually draw anyone's attention to it or, in fact, tell anybody. It was just quietly, silently buried deep in the Government Gazette.
Dark corners.
This is an example of a practice we've seen increase in the last several years, where legislation is passed with important details missing to be filled in afterwards by the government of the day. And in the past, those were incidental, ancillary, machinery sort of provisions. But now the substance of a lot of
Could
legislation
honourable members
that
please take
our
conversations
daily
outside?
life are in fact the subject of these regulations. In fact, without these regulations, the framework legislation would in fact have no meaning and no work to do. This is approaching what is colloquially known as the Henry VIII clauses, where the real business of government happens at the stroke of a pen in Government House with a handful of ministers and the Governor without actually telling the people of the state what's happening. But even just a casual observation about this particular regulation should reveal that it's not satisfactory.
He's still here.
Order.
The regulation which I've moved to disallow has
I call the
implications
Honourable
for
Ward
the
Searle
delivery
to order for the first time.
core government services and for the privacy and confidentiality of the personal details of citizens of this state presently held by the government. We think that at its heart this regulation reveals an intention by the government to privatise Service New South Wales. This is no small step, this is a very significant step. The government has extolled the virtues of Service New South Wales as one of their flagship policies. Despite the obvious failings, including an Auditor-General's report that dismantled the business case and assumptions, despite the savage cut of 25% of the operating hours late last year, and recent reports that some 1,600 driver's licences had become lost, possibly stolen, in the mail because they're no longer printed on site, government has continued to ignore the failings and talk about what a great success it is. And in establishing Service New South Wales, the government shut down and merged something like 40 different government agencies. And the model is based on the idea that all personal records, registration and licensing should happen from a single government source. Examples of the services currently offered include the registration of births, deaths and marriages, licensing including drivers, fishing, building, business, firearms for security and private investigators, business registrations, the registration of vehicles, capacity assessment for drivers and riders and the disabled, quality assessment of vehicles that are used on our roads and waterways, and dealing with interstate registrations and licensing for increasingly transient communities. It doesn't take a great deal of imagination to understand the sheer breadth of personal and private information for each and every single one of these services held by Service New South Wales. Often Service New South Wales, Mr. President, will know more about an individual than the people they are living with.
It was a barrier.
Now, privacy and the protection of that private information is at the core of this disallowance motion. The regulation lists 7 new private companies that will in the future, unless this regulation is disallowed, have access to people's private and personal information and have the authority to operate Service New South Wales. Looking at simply a driver's licence, there is a requirement that the holder of any such licence register with Service New South Wales a range of medical conditions, including mental health, seizures, dizzy turns, prosthetic conditions and even eyesight. And some of this private medical condition information is secured tightly by the individual and sometimes even withheld from other family members. There's also a requirement that driver's licence holders have current and regularly updated addresses. In domestic violence scenarios, for example, and in broken family situations, a person's new address can be a tightly held secret. The information is trusted with the New South Wales Government because it needs to run these databases of information and for proper regulatory purposes. But it's one thing to trust government with the information, it's another thing entirely to trust private for-profit operations. So those are just a couple of examples, and we are obviously concerned about having for-profit private organisations which do not have all the same oversight as government agencies. You know, for example, things like the GIPA legislation and other things and other oversight mechanisms do not apply to these companies, even when they're undertaking government work, which is a very important omission. The people of this state did not sign up for this. The government did not come in through the front door and propose legislation in the Houses of Parliament to effect this change. They've simply made a new regulation. But let's deal briefly with three arguments the government may raise. First of all is that there are already allowances for authorised persons and external operators to access information within Service New South Wales. They may say it's about increasing contestability in the market, and they may also say that there is no intention to privatise the Service New South Wales operation. Now, it's true that there's already an approved category of persons with access to the database, and that is Datacom Connect Proprietary Limited, who were listed as an authorised person by regulation about 2 years ago. And that was to allow the upgrading of the online interface between customers and Service New South Wales. At the time Datacom Connect were allowed to access Service New South Wales as an authorised person, it was important that an external agency with specialised skills would be brought on board to build much of the information technology interface. So that is something new and different that this company was able to offer the people of New South Wales as well as the government. It could be argued, therefore, that the skills it offered were new, separate and different. But if we look at the other 7 companies now on the list, you cannot make the argument that the skill sets they offer are unique or even rare. And what are they? Call centre workers, marketing operations, and the delivery of government services. Now, there is no way this government could dress up those 3 functions as not presently being available by the activities of government directly employed persons. Public servants in this state have for hundreds of years kept and maintained public records and delivered services to the people, and the people who work for Service New South Wales do that. So there is no new specialised set of skills to be provided by these 7 new companies, which leads to the final point. The only potential logic of this step is the further hollowing out and indeed the privatisation of the operation of Service New South Wales, but without having the courage to actually call it that and to legislate directly. Now, the government, of course, already have a private offshore call centre, which they snuck through without actually telling anybody, and this was the subject of some interplay at budget estimates in both 2014 and 2015. And I must say the relevant minister at the time didn't do himself or the government any favours by fencing and weaving over the question. But the point is that outsourcing already exists, so why the regulation? It can only be because you want to do something new and different, something fundamentally new and different. Now, and that leads us to why we think it should be disallowed, because if the government really wants to change course like this, they should come in through the front door, put legislation on the table and persuade people that this is a good thing, not simply make it by regulation. Turning to the issue of market testing, naming a limited number of private operators is the very antithesis of market testing. It's the very antithesis of an open market. If you're really wanting to test the market for the provision of services, you'd call for tenders, or you'd call for expressions of interest. The government hasn't done that. It's proceeded to name individual companies. I'll come to those in a moment. Okay. But none of these potential arguments that have been whispered around the corridors of this place in the last couple of days really cuts the mustard. It's quite clear to us that the government is really hell-bent on a further privatisation agenda. We've seen the sale of the electricity distribution companies, the sale of the land and property information operation, the privatisation of the Newcastle transit system, and of course now the buses in the inner west, and of course not sated with this drunken privatisation spree that want to take it out on Service New South Wales. But, Mr President, who are these 7 companies that the government wants to do business with? Who are these 7 companies? And I ask honourable members...
I call the Honourable Peter Phelps to order for the first time.
Thank you, Mr President. I invite the members of this House to reflect on who these companies are. Because if you don't support this disallowance, you'll be voting for your government doing business with each and every single one of these companies. So who are they? Concentrix Services. Currently, they incorrectly withdrew tax credits in the United Kingdom and are now having their government contract there pulled for incorrectly doing so from hundreds of centres. Employees in the UK will be transferred to government department because of the misconduct of that company. Peak Bound Holdings specialises in contact centres for the financial services sector, but it's one of a number of companies known to use aggressive call centre techniques, including calling members of the public multiple times of the day, at night, and sending text messages. The Probe Group specialise in outsourcing business services, including debt collection. They're part of the aggressive $2.9 million Centrelink repayment situation, and of course that involves many individuals who are having collection action taken against them, even though they were not aware that they owed Centrelink a debt. Again, they also use aggressive call centre techniques, multiple calls, different times of the day, and sending text messages. Salmat Contact Solutions, called by the Sydney Morning Herald a junk mail company, was responsible in the last year or so of the leak of ATAR results early. And they also assist Australian companies offshore and reduce wage costs. Serco Citizen Services. Now, the name Serco isn't entirely unknown in Australian political discourse. It's a British outsourcing company. The CFO, interestingly, has written a guide to outsourcing which states, and I quote, "Looking after your employees is the most difficult emotional hurdle to overcome. However, ensuring that employees are looked after will have implications to the cost for the outsourcer, as they will often have to employ those staff on the same terms." It's almost like they think this is a bad thing, Mr President. "There is a possibility that the employee's length of tenure with their current employer may have to be recognised. But if you plan ahead, these issues can be avoided," unquote. I mean, is this really a company we want our state government to be doing business with? Stellar Asia Pacific, again, research by the CPSU has found that Stellar Asia Pacific reported an income in this country of $122 million, but paid tax of about $2 million in the 14-15 financial year. They obviously have very good accountants, Mr President. Telco Services Australia provides outsourced services including inbound and outbound call centre support, telemarketing and a bunch of other like activities. Interestingly, the Fair Work Ombudsman commenced litigation in the Federal Court in 2011 against this company and another one for incorrectly classifying 10,000 sales staff as independent contractors instead of employees, costing workers entitlements such as annual leave and the proper rate of pay. And of course, that was corrected, but 10,000 employees is more than a small oversight, I would have thought. And again, they're another one of the companies said to be using aggressive marketing, call centre techniques, multiple calls and text messages and the like. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Mr President. That is just some of the features of these companies that this government wants to do business with through Service New South Wales. And I ask honourable members to reflect on the nature of those companies. If the government wants to persuade the Parliament to do business with these companies, they should do so through an open tender process or through an open and proper debate in the chamber. But park that to one side. Why list these 7 companies at all if they do not want to transfer more of the operations of Service New South Wales from the hands of government employees into the hands of these private corporations? It's quite clear that they do want to transition to a more private operation, otherwise they simply would not have made the regulation. We think the case is unarguable. We would urge honourable members to disallow the regulation so that if the government does honestly and openly want to pursue this policy agenda, they do so in a more proper way, which would be through legislation in the House or through an open tender process.
Any further speakers? Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr President. The people of New South Wales rightly expect to access New South Wales government services quickly, conveniently and simply. and they expect services to be delivered in ways and at times that suit their busy lives. We know people have busy lives and how frustrating it must be for them if they have to wait in long queues in a single siloed shopfront and are put on hold while trying to phone in for information, or if they can't find government information on the internet. This government has a strong commitment to put the citizen at the heart of customer service delivery. We want residents and businesses to have the benefit of service improvements and technology that is commonplace in many other countries and cities. That's why in July 2013 we launched the government agency Service New South Wales. This agency has reshaped government to focus on the needs of citizens, not the needs of government itself. Service New South Wales is delivering on the government's commitment to make it easier for citizens to do business with government no matter where they live. When Service New South Wales started, there was a fragmented and frustrating system which had hundreds of generally single-service shopfronts, 100 plus call centres, hundreds of unique websites with at least 50 alone providing transactional capability, and thousands of government telephone numbers. Now there's one place to go for a customer for all their transactional needs.
I love it.
And they do. I note that interjection. Apart from the step change in customer service, evidenced by the high customer satisfaction scores and a highly engaged team of customer service staff, Service New South Wales has simplified access to government services, improved the customer experience, empowered customers to self-select their service channel experience, the integrated and greater education of a variety of channels, plus the one-stop service means the citizen has greater awareness and greater opportunity to self-select a service channel, digitised more transactions and services, increased the digital take-up of transaction services by citizens, realised asset value through the sale of government properties, enhanced our analytical and customer insight, thus reducing costs and increasing efficiencies. Service New South Wales has adopted cloud-based technology, spearheading the New South Wales Government's ICT strategy as a model for enabling technology for service delivery, improving compliance and data security, yet adhering to principles of open government. This enables service channels for smaller scale agencies which are taking advantage of the Service New South Wales channel footprint to provide greater reach of services. It also enables Service New South Wales to scale up, for example providing overflow services to other agencies like the Rural Fire Service, the Office of Local Government and most recently the State Emergency Service, sometimes with only hours of notice. We've consolidated shopfronts but expanded services. We have reduced duplicated shopfronts but expanded services throughout New South Wales and throughout Service New South Wales. These are providing greater coverage than sub-agencies had before, for example, fair trading, but through the one-stop shop experience with extended trading hours and access to so many more transactions than siloed shopfronts. It allows customers to go to one location for many of their needs. I'm confident, Mr President, that Service New South Wales is continuing to fill the promise as set out by this government to improve customer services, respond to customers' growing appetite for digital transactions, while delivering a multi-channel experience to the citizens of New South Wales. A key customer service platform in the Service New South Wales is the Service New South Wales Contact Centre, which complements the one-stop shop and digital networks. The Contact Centre offers a single contact point for customers, providing services from more than 50 government agencies through one number, 137788. Our two contact centres are based in Parramatta and Newcastle and are key employment hubs in Sydney's west and the Central Coast, which I'm sure our newest member in this chamber will be very happy to hear. Collectively, they employ more than 400 staff, with 270 being employed on a permanent full-time basis. Each year, the dedicated team at the Contact Centre serves more than 5 million customers, offering end-to-end transactions such as tolling and registration renewal, technical advice, as well as general advice. When the Contact Centre was established in July 2013, it was set up under a blended model of service where the majority of calls were answered by Service New South Wales staff and after hours and overflow handled by an outsourced provider. As mentioned, this blended model arrangement has been in place since 2013. Contrary to claims, it is not new. What it has done has allowed Service New South Wales to scale up and down to suit customer and client demand. The model has enabled Service New South Wales to offer a wider range of services through its contact centre without compromising on customer service. It has also helped government to meet its commitment with customers to ensure that services and transactions are available for when customers require them most, such as during times of disaster. Earlier this year, as parts of the state were experiencing their hottest days on record, with temperatures approaching above 45 degrees, Service New South Wales was able to quickly deploy its contact centre to offer support for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. The solution which was deployed meant that when customers called the bushfire information line, their call could have been answered by a team member from Service New South Wales. Calls were then triaged and escalated to Rural Fire Service on an as-needs basis. The assistance that Service New South Wales Contact Centre provided on this day allowed emergency services to focus on their core business of supporting communities in fire-affected areas. On that day, Service New South Wales responded to 710 calls over a 9.5-hour period, achieved a service level of 96% and had a maximum wait time average of just over 3 minutes. Through its blended model, Service New South Wales was able to quickly offer emergency services with support and assistance without compromising its core services, its offers to customers on a daily basis. And thank God they did. What the changes mean, Mr President, are that since 2013, Service New South Wales has retained the services of a sole provider, Datacom, as no other arrangement existed. The recent changes have been introduced to allow Service New South Wales to bring on other business partners to provide customer services on their behalf. The recent legislative change was required as part of a tender process to create a panel of outsourcers to get maximum value for taxpayers while continuing to ensure a greater quality of service. As part of the tender process, Service New South Wales leveraged the existing panel of suppliers to the Australian Taxation Office, drawing upon the best practice capability in the market. The Australian Tax Office has maintained outsourced contact centre arrangements since 2006 and in 2012 established the Outsourced Labour for Service Delivery Panel as a whole of government initiative. The ATO sought to enhance the contact centre arrangement to include a multi-supplier outsource model, including high utilisation of the suppliers from the panel, driving economies of scale for the whole of government and delivering value for money with significant efficiencies and savings. The ATO panel is a robust and tested solution. As Service New South Wales scales up and increases the range of services it delivers for the citizens of New South Wales, it must have a delivery model that is efficient, scalable and responsive to change. Use of outsourced providers as the need arises for answering simple calls is a solution that makes sense in terms of service delivery. And the panel arrangement makes sense in guaranteeing the best result for the New South Wales taxpayer. Contact centres have experienced significant growth in customer demand compared to previous years and will be required to answer more customers. Service New South Wales is a success story of this government, Mr President, and is delivering a new era in customer service in New South Wales. Instead of having to go to multiple locations, websites or calling different phone numbers, customers can complete it all at one location, one digital platform and through one phone number. Service New South Wales enables customers to undertake more than 970 transactions and it is growing. Customers can do everything from applying for a birth certificate or a seniors card, renewing a driver's licence or a vehicle registration and paying Housing New South Wales rent or a fine in the one visit. Since launching in July 2013, Service New South Wales has delivered exceptional services with more than 70 million customer visits across our multiple channels. And I note the interjection from the Dr. Peter Phelps that it is a triumph for this government and it is one that I hear constantly from citizens of New South Wales that they're glad that this government introduced. The network is still growing and we are continuing to develop new solutions to meet the growing customer appetite to transact online. In less than 4 years, the business has grown from a start-up to now serving more than 1 million customers per week, either face-to-face, over the phone or, of course, online. Service New South Wales continues to make a difference to the way people deal with government. It has been recognised by other governments here and overseas as best practice. The Service New South Wales one-stop shop service has already received positive feedback from citizens. The Service New South Wales team is consistently receiving 97% customer satisfaction scores, unchanged since its opening, which is an enviable result for any enterprise.
Any further speakers? The Honourable Robert Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to briefly add my contribution on behalf of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party in support of the disallowance motion.
Yeah.
Now, I've sat carefully and listened to the Parliamentary Secretary's speech, full of glowing praise for Service New South Wales. Well, let's have a little bit of history, shall we?
Yeah.
Was it not about 2 months ago that the same organisation, and maybe its single provider, mismailed 3,000 pieces of highly secure information, including 140 firearms licences?
It was.
I think it was.
Duh. That's D-U-H-H. And so, duh. I take my colleagues back to 2008 to 2010. Many of you weren't here then. A police whistleblower, Sergeant David Good, brought to my attention that some pencil neck bureaucrat in the police service had decided that it would be a good idea to download the encrypted COPS, C-O-P-S system on the firearms licensees into an open database at the police centre here in Sydney. Why? So that the bureaucrats could better check the progress of LACs doing firearms safety security checks. At the time, I think the Minister might have been the Honourable Tony Kelly. I took the problem to him. He then asked, I think it might have been Superintendent, I'm not quite sure of his rank at the time, Dave Owen, to look into it. Dave Owen did. Came back 2 days later and said I was imagining it. Came back a week later and apologised. Oh dear. Oh dear. That database had been downloaded for 2 years. Right at the same time, the RTA discovered that in their IT department they had employed the boss of one of Sydney's biggest bikie gangs. Whoops. The government, not long after, brought in the infamous ammo bill. We all remember that. I remember standing on that side of the Parliament and being called to order and apologising for calling members of the National Party's names over their conduct in the other place, where they ducked out behind the Speaker's chair to avoid the vote. The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, or Shooters, and probably even Shooters Party back then, has been consistent in our claims, supported of course by evidence, that these breaches in security were causing privacy and security issues for owners of firearms. One of the great things about the firearms regime, the firearms licensing regime, and there aren't many, is the fact that security of firearms in the distributed model, which means that nobody knows where they are, is effective. It's effective until such time as you get, generally speaking, government department screw-ups, like the downloading of a secure database so that any clown could get into it without having to log in their PIN number. By bringing in legislation where they were warned that it would create problems for ordinary citizens. And of course, what happened after the ammo bill came in? The ammunition registers started to get stolen. And the number of targeted home break-ins targeting firearms safes increased. This government, I believe, on the agenda for maybe even this week, is going to bring in some amendments to the firearms licensing law and the ammo bill or regulations to hopefully increase the security for people who hold firearms in their own homes. So it's indescribable that at the same time they're planning that, they would put forward regulations that could lead to a worsening of security for firearm owners. Now, I'm just talking about firearm owners, but in that little debacle where 3,000 pieces of paper or documents were mismailed, there was confidential information on disability services, on all sorts of things went all over New South Wales. Does this government seriously believe that by increasing the number of subcontractors you're going to use to handle all this data, you are going to somehow be able to do it with the same level or a better level of security? I don't think so. I don't think so. And so we, the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, will be supporting the disallowance motion, and we'll make sure that every one of the 237,000 licensed shooters in the state knows what's going on, of which 47,000 odd are primary producers. The government should think more carefully about taking some of these steps. Yes, it may be in the name of efficiency, it may be seen to be good. But, you know, increased scope, scoping up and increasing the business of Service New South Wales, you can't stand here, Mr Parliamentary Secretary, and say that it's been, you know, done without, without fault or whatever terms you use, when, you know, you've got citizens out there who've had their personal details mailed to the wrong address. Simply not right. So for that reason and that reason alone, we will support the disallowance motion.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise today on behalf of the Greens to support the disallowance motion brought by the opposition with regards to Service New South Wales One-Stop Shop Access to Government Services Amendment Approved Persons Regulation 2017. It deals with Section 12 of the Act, which says the CEO may enter into an agreement with an approved person for the person to act as an agent for the CEO in providing customer service functions on behalf of the CEO. And of course the change is to add an additional 7 businesses, and that was outlined by the opposition. I listened to the contribution by the government and the contribution and by the honourable member from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. And to me the question is, what is the intent here? That wasn't dealt with by the government. They were very quick to talk about how Service New South Wales, its introduction, has provided, you know, this great improved customer experience, self-select, enable customers to self-select their user experience. These fancy words, when at the end of the day people just want to be able to get their licence, put in a form, pay a bill.
And they're happy with the system.
They might be happy with the system, but let's remember that even if we put aside the concerns that have been raised, the concerns when they slashed opening hours that were raised within the media just last year, even the admission that there's been a reduced number of outlets, it's all been for improved user experience. But of course nearly all of that's been delivered by the public service. Yes, there's been some elements of it that have been shared for scalability, but if there's been a fantastic outcome from the change to the Service New South Wales model, almost all of that's been delivered through the public service. So why now is there this move? What is the intention to add these additional 7 businesses to provide these services? What sort of services are they going to provide? The questions raised by the opposition about why you wouldn't go out to tender for specific services are fair. These 7 new entities aren't just support services. When you go and look at the details of the sorts of things that are provided, and Serco is the most obvious one, I mean, they provide whole of government services. They run immigration detention centres, they run defence establishments and infrastructure. They do far more than just do supporting elements for government. So the question is, what is the intent here? What other elements of Service New South Wales would be run by these bodies if they were approved through this regulation? I have a motion on the notice paper at the moment that outlined the extent of the government's privatisation agenda over the life of this government since 2011. $53 billion of public services and assets, many of them monopoly services, essential services and assets that have been sold off. That is the objective of this government, where it possibly can, to sell off those services. I think the community are asking the question, what have they gotten from that? Have we seen, what have they gotten from it? They're asking that question. $53 billion, and there's some half-finished toll roads that are being built. There's some large train lines, we'll admit that, but very little for the country. Very little for the country. Very little for regional New South Wales. People are asking, what did they get for it? So why does the government continually pursue this sort of approach when at the end of the day the community just want to ensure those services are available affordable where that's relevant to that particular service. And so the question comes back to what is the intention of the government with this regulation? And that was not spelt out in the response by the Parliamentary Secretary. So the Greens will support the disallowance motion brought by the opposition today.
Yeah.
Are there any further speakers? The Leader of the the Honourable Paul Green.
Oh, Paul, come on. Don't disappoint us, Paul. Are you going to disappoint the community?
Mr. President, I've listened very carefully to all inputs of the members.
You're the deciding vote, Paul.
And as per usual, taking into consideration the long history that we play in these particular votes, I'm confident, I have enough confidence that the government is on the right track with this, given their speech. And I, as per usual, acknowledge the Honourable Adam Searle's concerns, and they're real concerns, and that's what the opposition does well, is raise those concerns. But we will vote with the government on this matter.
The Leader of the Opposition reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the honourable members who have made a contribution. The Honourable Paul Green, MLC, Mr. Justin Field, and of course the Parliamentary Secretary, and of course the Parliamentary Secretary, and of course Robert Brown from the Shooters and Fishers and Farmers Party, who raised a particular concern which really encapsulates the matter which is at the heart of our concern, which is the security of personal and private information held by government agencies. Now, what was revealing about the Parliamentary Secretary's contribution is that he didn't answer any one of those concerns. It was full of glib statements about value for money and customer service, and none of those things are an issue in this matter. What is an issue is why is the government proposing now to add 7 named new companies to the list of authorised persons who can do the operations of Service New South Wales.
I think the Privacy Commission would like to have been consulted on this.
I acknowledge that interjection. And of course, what is also missing from the contribution of the government in this debate is any response to the concerns about those 7 named companies which we referred to. And I just ask the Parliamentary Secretary and honourable members whether the government has done its due diligence on each of those companies. Voting against this disallowance is a vote to do business with every single one of those companies. But more than that, it is a vote to transfer personal and private information held by the government to private corporations without the protection of the oversight and accountability mechanisms that currently operate in relation to government agencies. Because make no mistake, when you outsource, you remove from oversight the activities that are currently done by government. And that is the concern that we have, and that is the issue that the government has not addressed. And I would urge honourable members to disallow this regulation so that the government can reflect on these matters, and if they still think this is a good policy agenda, come in through the front door with a piece of legislation and outline why you want to do business with these 7 named companies.